Hello, welcome to Post Colonial Space. I'm Masood Raja, and in my attempt to offer you daily video logs, today's topic is about Paulo Freire and how best to use his work. Now, if you are aware of my channel, you already know that I have a whole playlist on Pedagogy of the Oppressed, where we are reading the book passage by passage, line by line, and talking about it. And I think because I've produced that body of work on Freire, I occasionally get comments from here and there where people basically tell me, oh, Freire destroyed our educational system. This doesn't work. And I think those comments are sincere, but they are missing one important point. And that is that Pedagogy of the Oppressed isn't a blueprint, right? It isn't something that you have to implement as it is written. Freire's work overall was concerned not with the formal school education, but with adult education. So that's the first thing to keep in mind, because when he's talking about education and liberation, he's talking about the peasants, right? He's talking about the poor rural populations. More importantly, just like any other work, instead of blaming Paulo Freire, what we should be doing is reading him carefully and then seeing how we can adapt his ideas to our use. So, for example, if you're teaching in elementary school, right, there isn't much that you can expect from your students in terms of coming up with new ideas. You can't expect them to know basic math, right? You will have to teach it to them. But if you were to use Freire's insight, instead of teaching it from top down, you could teach it in a way where they enjoy the process, right? Where they participate in a fun and playful way, and that would be kind of a problem-solving education and not top-down banking education. So just like any other work of praxis or theory, Paulo Freire can be useful, but useful only when we read him carefully and adapt his ideas to our particular situation. So instead of, just stating outrightly, oh, this was implemented in our educational system and it destroyed a generation of students, maybe the problem isn't with Freire. The problem is with people who read him and then tried to implement him. And the moment you try to implement Freire's thought on a structural, larger level, you've already taken away its potency. Because what then people are supposed to do is figure out whether they're following a given policy or not, right? The beauty of Freire's thought is that it is revolutionary and that it can't really be institutionalized. It has to be a praxis by individual teachers here and there who can talk in solidarity with each other. But anytime it is implemented top down, that defangs Freire's thought, right? Because in order for it to become systemic, the system must have changed, right? That's a prerequisite. And Pedagogy of Oppressed is about how to change the system bottom up, right? In solidarity with each other. So, this is just a brief video of my thoughts in response to such views of Paulo Freire's work. But also keep in mind that no book on this planet is perfect. No book can give us a perfect recipe for change. All that books do, especially written by people who were practitioners of pedagogy, is give us their ideas and their practices. Then we bring our own subjectivity to it, our own existential and contextual situation, where we are, what is it we do, right? And combined with our own views of the world, our own practices, and a text like Pedagogy of the Oppressed, we cobble together in a way a mode of pedagogy that is reflective, but that is praxis-driven, right? And that is the best use of Paulo Freire's work, is where we combine a liberatory inclination as teachers with theory, but also with our practice, right? And that way, if we feel like a certain aspect of the text or its explanation is not working for us, we at least have the basic principles to keep in mind as we formulate our own practice, right? So let's say if you have read your Freire, you already know that his adopted model, his privileged model of education is what he calls the problem-posing or problem-solving education, right? You can define it in any way you want, depending on at what level do you teach. One thing that you already know you absolutely must not do as a teacher is to do what he calls the banking model of education, where you take it upon yourself to become the font of knowledge and the students are passive recipients, right? If you know that principle, not to be a font of knowledge that fills in these empty vessels, then you will constantly try to undermine your own privilege, reflect on it, and come up with the ways that are more inclusive and that involve more of students' thoughts, ideas, and their lives in your teaching. So let me give you an example, right? Let's say I taught for years at a university, right? There is a curriculum, there is a syllabus, and there are my students. One way of dealing with my students is to assume that they all are on a level playground, right? And then my expectations are geared towards that. But I can further tweak it a little. If I have a student who's working 2 jobs and paying her way through college, I don't have to cut her some slack, but when she reaches out to me and says, can I take 2 more days on this assignment, that contextual information has to be a part of my decision making. That's what will make me compassionate, right? But also will encourage this student to know that the professor will listen to her and respects what she is doing, right? So these are some of the little tweaks that we can make by looking at our students not as a mass, right? But as individual beings with their struggles, with the realities of the life that they live in. And if that insight, we can keep reminding us ourselves, we are following some of Freire's, pedagogy, some of his ideas. So overall, to sum up, Paulo Freire doesn't offer all the answers. He gives us a praxis that he himself practiced. He gives us theory and ideas that he taught for his entire adult life as a scholar and philosopher of education. We cannot just take that as a blueprint and implement it in any given situation. We have to read him carefully and then see what works for us and what doesn't. And if what doesn't work, we can change it, we can reframe it, we can, do it differently, keeping in mind the basic principle. What is the purpose of education? Revolutionary change. What kind of revolutionary change? A world in which everyone can realize and live their full humanity. That's the general aim of education. Within that, what we absolutely must not do, adopt this position of top-down teaching, the banking model of education, and instead encourage ourselves and others to develop what he calls the problem-posing or problem-solving system of education, in which students are active participants in their own education. So these are some of my thoughts off the cuff about objections to Freire's work that I hear every now and then. I hope this answers those questions. And, you have a full playlist available on Pedagogy of the Oppressed. I highly recommend that you go page by page with me and read the book and watch the videos and then share your ideas. That's all. Thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for your support. I will now see you next time. Until then, as always, peace and love.